Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is the second half of our morning session here at the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. We have testifying via Zoom on our H612 bill, Joey Topolsky, Satori. So, Joey, could you introduce yourself and tell us what you know about our H612? I think you were going to talk to us a little bit about the potency caps in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Chair McCarthy and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Joseph Topolsky, and I serve as the lab manager at Satori in Middlebury, Vermont. For those of you who couldn't join on our tour last week, Satori is a Tier 5 cultivator, as well as a wholesaler and Tier 3 manufacturer. It's a great place to work. Currently, there are 51 full-time employees. We enjoy competitive salaries and benefits, including healthcare. There is a real spirit of teamwork among the employees, as we all work together on our mission to grow great cannabis and produce the best cannabis products in Vermont. Satori has made a real investment in the facility, reclaiming a defunct warehouse factory, cleaning up the contaminated property, and installing cutting-edge cultivation technology which saves electricity and water and helps us grow a great quality product. With 7 years of experience as a medical marijuana patient and home cultivator, and my professional involvement in Vermont's CBD industry since its inception, I'm here today to discuss the significant benefits of removing the potency caps on cannabis concentrates. My journey in this field began in early 2020 when I moved to Southern Vermont to assist in establishing the first analytical and processing lab in the state, Northeast Processing. Our collaboration with Vermont hemp farmers has been instrumental in advancing formulations, extraction techniques, and compliance within the state. Here are some of the advantages of removing the potency caps. 1, an increased tax revenue. Eliminating potency caps can lead to a higher tax revenue for the state. This is due to the increased cannabinoid yield retention from source biomass. For example, hydrocarbon extraction yields about 95%, whereas ethanol extraction will yield about 70%. More yield translates to more cannabis units manufactured and consequently more taxable products. Market diversification. The removal of these caps enables the introduction of diverse product lines such as shatters, waxes, and diamonds. This diversification allows us to recapture market share of these products, which are currently dominated by legal bordering states such as Massachusetts. Another advantage, authentic ratios. Lifting these restrictions facilitates the production of concentrates with cannabinoid to terpene ratios that closely mimic those found in natural dried cannabis flowers. This authenticity is vital for both medical efficacy and consumer preference. Safety enhancements. The removal of potency caps, especially concerning hydrocarbon extraction, necessitates that all operators use a Class 1 Division 1 booth approved by the state fire marshal. These booths, equipped with exhaust fans and solvent vapor sensors, ensure a controlled and safe environment, thereby reducing risks associated with the extraction process. Currently, Vermont enforces a potency cap of 60% on cannabis concentrates. However, there is an allowance for manufacturers to produce and distribute solid concentrates above 60% potency if they are prepackaged in vaporization devices. This regulatory inconsistency not only hinders product development, but also poses challenges to the industry, such as the current mechanical separation methods are time-consuming and labor-intensive. These methods significantly reduce the manufacturer's yield, and producers are forced to explore fewer effective alternatives to maintain compliance. In summary, the removal of potency caps on cannabis concentrates offers a pathway to increase state revenue, market diversification, product authenticity, and enhanced safety standards. As Vermont looks to foster a robust and compliant cannabis industry, reconsidering these caps could be a pivotal step in achieving these goals and shutting down the black market, which I think we all can agree is a good thing. Thank you so much for all your time and all of your hard work.
Thanks, Mr. Topolsky. Do folks have questions for Joey? Go ahead, Representative Myra.
Joey, good to see you again. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, to sort of a refresher for the members that were with us when we visited you last week, and for those who were not with us, a little bit about the added agents that are currently being used, to cut to get down to the 60% threshold from the concentrates in the illicit market, whatnot?
Yes, absolutely. So often what you'll find that manufacturers are utilizing to be able to come within the potency compliant limit is either additional terpenes, both cannabis derived or botanically derived from food grade additives, or utilizing additives such as fats and lipids from the source biomass, or referring to other type of things such as the illicit market like vitamin E acetate and other non-cannabis additives to achieve a lower potency.
So just to be clear, so for folks who are manufacturing on the illicit market, obviously they're using some things that are pretty dangerous. Like we've heard from you and others about the dangers of vitamin E acetate as a way to cut the potency down of some of those solid concentrates. For people who are working for a licensed manufacturer like you are, you're still needing to, if you're producing some of these concentrates, needing to use something to reduce the potency. What are the impacts of that potentially in the legal market?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think is becoming common practice among manufacturers throughout the state is the addition of terpenes into the final concentrate. You'll see that Vermont already has imposed a 10% terpene cap on concentrates for fear of an inhalation of these products and having it be very volatile. So by having to have solid concentrates, be having to utilize these type of adulterant ingredients to cut with to achieve potency caps, inherently then make the end product a little bit less ethical and safe for consumption. And then another additive, which I think is also being utilized, is lipids in it. And if you want to look at other components, similar risk of vitamin E acetate, when you're looking at components that are not meant for vaporization, lipids fall under that additional category as well. Lipids being the fats and waxes that are primarily found in the biomass.
So would it be fair to say that those lipids, when they're vaporized, that we don't really know what the health impact potentially is of inhaling those products?
That is correct. At the levels that they're being consumed at, there's not enough studies. However, there is studies showing that vaporization of lipids can lead to conditions such as lipid pneumonia.
Any other questions for Joey? Well, thank you very much for being willing to zoom in and join us and add your perspective as somebody who does some of these chemical processes in a legal way in a lab. I also, one question that I had that I wanted to, I think I know the answer to, is that right now, it's my understanding that you're able to produce higher potency, that the potency caps that we have don't apply to the liquid that goes into a vape cartridge, for instance, when on the legal market. So what's the difference between the prohibition that we have on the higher potency for, the concentrates that are not in a prepackaged device?
What is the prohibition?
So like, what are the differences between what's in the legal vape cartridge today versus, a distillate, for instance?
Yeah, totally. And thank you for rephrasing that. I definitely understand it. So I'll give a great actually analogy of two products that are currently distributed in the state of Vermont that have become a very dominating product class recently, and that would be ice water extracted live rosin concentrates. So you could have a live rosin that will be testing above 66% and will be incompliant to sell as a solid concentrate. That exact same live rosin, without any type of additives to it, will get decarboxylated into a pressurized vessel and then constituted into a vape cartridge where it then could be compliantly sold, getting just constituted into a 510 thread battery. So in terms of the difference between the actual material, The only difference is that it's been fully decarboxylated, and in a vape cartridge, it's completely fully active and significantly more accessible for the end user to consume.
So you've given us a few things to think about. So any other questions for Joey before we let him go? Thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your perspective as a lab manager. We don't often get folks who are working hands-on in the field who are willing to come in and testify before the committee, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the time today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
That last answer pretty much put the cap on any questions.
So, I mean, I think one of the things with this is getting like just for the group, like a better understanding, I think of just like what these ingredients are. I'd like to have like a conversation with some more, maybe some folks about the opinions on specifically what's being found as kind of agents. Not even getting this conversation. There's your opinion on this.
Yeah, I think what's challenging is for us, and it's been the challenge with this entire conversation is, you know, do we as policymakers, are we the ones who should be evaluating public health risk versus the public health benefit? You know, it's been the decision of the General Assembly on most of the other cannabis products that the better path is to have things be regulated and tested, and when we're getting to the solid concentrates question, there's a market for these products. Some of them are just being sort of cut so that they're compliant, to Joey's point. And some of the things that they're being cut with, even though they're not like on the legal and regulated market as bad as the vitamin E acetate, you know, illegal vape cartridges and popcorn lung. I wonder, you know, if we should learn a little bit more about some of the lipids and other, you know, or higher terpene content. I don't know how good the information is out there, and I think we may hear a number of people's opinions on it. But I think what we heard from Chair Pepper was pretty clear that their preference would be that we lift the caps and bring all of these products into a regulated space. And
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like my biggest fear is especially the cut ingredients that are still finding their way around this market because they're not doing 100% on a lot of the products that are sold there. That's where like the vitamin E acetate comes in. There's already been media. There was a notable number of deaths not long ago from vitamin E acetate.
yeah, and I also, as we're talking about this, I want anybody who's listening to this to understand when people are buying some of these products on the illegal market, they're illegal. They're cut with things that, you know, somebody in a regulated lab, like we just heard from Mr. Topolsky about Satori, you know, they're not using those really dangerous things that we know are dangerous, but they are reducing the potency using things that might not be great to vaporize and inhale. And so it's like, I don't know that we're going to be able to get to a great conclusion, but I'm happy to take more testimony on that from medical professionals who can help us weigh this. But I also think, you know, I'd love to get the committee sense of what should be our next step. I mean, I think the reason that I wanted to put the potency cap conversation on the table in the context of H612 was to say, this is one part of us potentially getting at some of these public safety concerns around what's happening on the illicit market and the cutting with substances that may not be so great on the legal product line. And then, so there's that whole half of it, but then there's also the future of the medical market. And I think the urgency around the future of the medical program is the bigger priority from what I heard from Chair Pepper today, but I want to hear what other folks are thinking at this point. So Representative Murwicki and Water Settlements.
There's two questions there.
I'll go to the second one first. I mean, when we talked about, or my recollection, when we talked about creating the system we have now, is that one of the collateral damage was going to be the medical system. I don't know if this is a surprise to anyone. On the other point, I'm hearing from a lot of medical providers who would like to be heard here and they're sending communication. So we heard a lot today without hearing from any. I'm hoping we can schedule some of those. So I'd like to hear that perspective on the record.
Yeah, since I let the Vermont Medical Society go first, I didn't bring them back in today, but this will not be the last time we talk about this. And they represent a number of medical professionals that have been really involved in this. But yes, absolutely, we will hear from more folks. You know, we heard from a couple of voices that were saying, do not remove these potency caps in our first look at this. So I think that's a really valid perspective, and we can hear from more of those folks if the committee would like to. But I think they've been very clear about that. And I want the committee to get the full breadth of what's available out there. I think it's one thing to say, don't remove the caps because you don't want people consuming this product. And it's another thing to recognize that there are folks consuming this product, these types of products, and some of them have just been reduced to be compliant that are sold legally on the regulated market. And some of them, you know, are things that people are buying illicitly that are really unsafe. And so I want us to get the full breadth. Representative Waters.
Thanks. I was wondering, I was not here when this legislation was initially created. So my understanding is that the reason the caps exist is to prevent people from having too much. Is that the reason why it exists?
And I can't really tell you, I can't really tell you definitively why we have the caps that we have. I think they're,
Okay.
I think,
Was it a
so what I
compromise
heard,
or-
I mean, it essentially was a compromise. There was a concern that I think is a really valid one. I think some of what we've heard today is all about the one side, and we've heard the Vermont Medical Society and others say, don't touch the caps. So just wanted to say, like, we're not trying to promote a particular point of view here. I just want to make sure we're hearing the whole thing because it is a really specific policy choice. I think that the driving force behind it was exactly that. It was, we don't want to encourage people to consume a whole bunch of THC really fast and, you know, have the psychoactive component be at a really high concentration. I think that Chair Pepper referenced that there is some evidence that there's a correlation between some pretty negative health outcomes. And we also heard that reference from the Vermont Medical Society when they were in here, that have been correlated with the use of solid concentrates and higher THC products. So those are some of the concerns. So that drove the policy decision. And in everything about the original bill and the original law that set us on the path to having the regulated market that we have now was, you know, a series of policy choices that were made. And now that, to Representative Murwicki's point, we're at a place now where we knew that the medical market would be cannibalized, at least to a degree, by the adult use market. And so now the question is, how do we respond to that? We could make the policy choice of just saying, hey, we're going to let things be the status quo. I think we've got a series of recommendations here from the Cannabis Control Board that are about making a transition.
Right, because essentially what we're regulating right now is anything that's at the potency cap and under. Nothing else is regulated because it's all
It's illegal.
illegal.
Yep.
Okay.
Representative Chase.
I think one of my first thoughts is the deaths we had from the adulterants in the vape cartridges and stuff in the past, making sure that doesn't happen. And I think that's why the vape cartridges aren't currently capped. I think I'm disinclined to have cap for the same substance in one container, but not a different container, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. And I would, now that we've built the market and we've established a team of experts that have a lot more time to study the nuance of this stuff, I'm inclined to defer to them as far as their experience, the testimony they've taken, the experts that they can talk to all year round, and come up with the best and safest path forward.
Representative Hooper and Morgan.
I don't want I sense we're on the verge of a conversation that's heavily influenced by medical opinion versus business opportunities. I don't want to go there. Our primary protection job as government is to make sure not that people make a profit, but that we don't harm sort of a populace. That having been said, Joey's comment at the end of the additives might be just as bad as the product seems to take a scab off something that might be a very big wound to be looking into this late in the legislative 2-year cycle. We knew this was going to be complicated, and I think Representative Warren's comment was true. We looked in that direction, I think, I looked at caps favorably because of the ability of people to harm themselves intentionally.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Representative Morgan.
Yes, so to piggyback on the two gentlemen to my right with their comments, I think we also heard from counselors with concerns that weighed in last week or the week before. I think you alluded to that, Mr. Chair. So I think we have to be mindful of that, but what I'm also mindful of, I don't know about all of you, and I'm not asking for that, but me personally, I think I can accurately use the term pounded by people, constituents, maybe some aren't, but a majority are, that are saying, y'all are being duplicitous here. You are talking out of both sides of your mouths. You want to ban menthol cigarettes, flavored tobaccos, vapes potentially that are already on the market, but yet you want to create a greater boutique of marijuana or cannabinoid usage. And I have to be mindful of that because I think I've maybe had literally 2 people say, "Raw, go for the ban on that stuff." And the rest are like, "Are you kidding me? You're talking over here and over here." And I'm putting it on the table for whatever it's worth category. I'm just being an honest broker. I bit my tongue on it, but now I've decided, I mean, I got 3 more yesterday.
Yeah.
And I can't ignore that. That would be, I believe, derelict in my duty as a representative to go, you're not paying attention to what we're talking to you about.
So
Do you understand my conundrum on that?
yeah,
I mean,
one of the things we did in the setting up of this market is that we prohibited with cannabis any flavors being added to flour and any of the oils and the things that go into the inhaled. So there really isn't any flavor, and there's an explicit prohibition in the statute that talks about anything that might appeal. That has, I think it's something like that it would appeal to folks under 21 years of age. So the entire way and the way that I think about what we've done with cannabis is to acknowledge there are folks who use this. We are not trying to promote its use, but even in this conversation about potency caps, what we're wrestling with is whether we want to leave the use of those solid concentrates at higher potency on the illicit market, or whether we want to bring it in and regulate it like we regulate everything else. Because, like, for instance, you can't buy an artificially flavored cannabis vape.
mhm.
That's not, so the things that come from the products that Joey, who just testified, works on at that particular cannabis company, they can't add a bubblegum flavor or a menthol flavor to those things. We specifically prohibited that. So I actually think when the Human Services Committee, if we end up, voting on S18, I think it is actually before us, right? So we're actually with S18 bringing the tobacco products more in line with what we already have for cannabis. So we've already prohibited the flavors with cannabis products.
Yeah, I totally understand, 100%. I get the intellect mind, I'm saying, but I'm going also with the emotional proponent of it, that folks are going, again, don't get it. And I hope you can appreciate what I'm saying with that. But and I'm not doing it to be contrarian here. I'm just being realistic because, as we know in our world, sometimes perception very much becomes reality. And I'm being brutally honest.
And I think what's happening with how some of the products with cannabis, the names that are given to the strains and varietals, which predate the legal market, infer some of the, a taste of what you're smoking, right? Like it'll allude to natural flavors that are present in the plant itself. And some of those names that were given by people essentially doing marketing in the black market to some infer that there might be a flavor added or applied, which isn't the case. And so when you're dealing with these strain designations, I just commonly use like mine as an example. It's like one strain is like a Beaujolais, one strain is like a Rioja. And so those all have their own distinct flavor profiles. And it's very much the same, virtually identical within cannabis. And that's where people start conflating whether or not they were added and they were not.
No, I understand.
It's like the terroir of the product.
Like I said, this side of my brain is the intellect piece of it. I got it, 100%. But the other side of it has to also listen to that. And whether it's perception or reality, it's a reality for them. And we are, again, the term I'll use is, I don't want to be a broken record, is duplicitous, I believe is the correct term, that we're talking here and we're talking here. And I'm listening to that. And as part of decisional stuff, and like I said, to this point, I've not said that, but I did. And I may be one of 12 on an island here in this committee on with coming out with that, but that's okay. And I'm willing to be that guy on the island. It's okay.
That's why we're doing this right now.
I don't think any of us is alone, but Representative
Representative Morgan is not alone. I also hearing things like that, like particularly about the edibles that are out there because they're so appealing. You don't have to inhale them. You just eat them like candy. And I feel like we're spending a lot of time on this and probably it's at some level worthwhile. But this body just passed safe injection sites recently. And I just feel like that just rammed through in a week. And here we are still debating this conversation about cannabis. I have a hard time with all of the illegal substances, and I did not vote to make this legal in any way, shape, or form, and I was not here for the medical decision. So I just cannot advocate for getting rid of caps. So I really wish we were working on something else besides this. I just find this a lot of work, and I don't think we're going to come to a decision that we all agree.
So I appreciate that, Representative Hango. I don't want us to belabor the cannabis bill, but given that we have a number of things that we are working on, I'm hoping everybody finds that there's something that they are enjoying in our work here. And I think that what I'm hearing from the committee pretty loud and clear is that getting rid of the potency caps is not going to have a majority of support on this committee at this time. So I think that is, I'm hearing that loud and clear. What I would like us to do is to work with guess sit with some of the recommendations that came out of the report about what do we do about the medical program now that we know where we are. Part of that may include some of the products that are already available at the medical market being available if we go down the path of an endorsement. So what I would like the committee to consider working on is taking a look at language in a week or so that tries to encapsulate some of the recommendations that are in this report. Most of the other things I think that are in 612 are either technical updates or, I don't know that if anybody has any, big concerns about the, specifying that the farm building not be treated as a public building and those sorts of things. But it seemed to me that this question around the potency caps is one that it's been a big point of debate. And I wanted to have this more robust conversation. I'm not going to belabor it or try to, beat it to death, but I think it was important for us to all sort of get it out on the table before we sort of say, okay, well, if we're not going to lift the caps, then how are we going to sort of hold patients harmless and move forward with the medical market? And I think we can probably do that in a responsible way that doesn't have some of the same impact that just an outright lifting of the caps would have. But interested to hear what people think of that. So Representative Waters Evans and Representative Hoover.
So is there a way to not eliminate the caps altogether, but to raise the potency limit to kind of match what the, no?
Probably not.
I'm just,
Because you're still gonna, like, we're still gonna, it's still gonna have a black market presence. They're still gonna be using the same illicit cuts. I mean, maybe it's worth a chat, but
or at least like if the point is to regulate things to make them safer, then you would be adding a chunk of things that were then, you know what I mean? You'd be,
I think that
I don't know
that
about
it's a
that.
pretty binary choice.
okay.
I think, I don't think that there's a lot of policy benefit in choosing a limit that's between what we have now and no limit. Because what we're talking about with the concentrates at the 60% level is, it's high enough that there's a pretty high amount of THC. But it's the question of like, do you want to have people who are really interested in these products going to the black market or not? Do you want to have this regulated and available or not? Because if we just chose a slightly higher cap, we'd be essentially in the same place from.
Okay.
that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be in support of lifting the caps. I'm the only one in the room.
No, I don't think.
We never had
I
a
feel-
conversation
I feel
about
fine
that
being
until we
alone
said sort of
in
like
that regard,
stay or like
Well, do
this.
we want to regulate it or do we not want to regulate it? Right? Like if we want to regulate it, then you have to acknowledge that it's all out there, just unregulated.
So, Representative Burton, Representative.
I somewhat agree with Representative Pango that, and my prior comment about taking this up in year 2. There's a lot to chew on here. We'd probably end up spending the whole time on this, which I think would disservice a lot of the things that are on the wall. As far as the caps are concerned, I'm sympathetic to the idea that other people are unregulated. I'm also very concerned about the information I just heard about some of the stuff that we're subjecting people to meet that cap is not healthy for them either. Would love to take some testimony on that from an actual doctor / chemist who knows what's going on in the body and knows what to put into it.
Yeah, and if folks have specific people with expertise that have contacted them that haven't contacted me, I mean, I don't think I've said no to anybody that has contacted me as the chair. So I just want to make it clear, I'm not curating the testimony you're hearing other than trying to provide a variety of perspectives that have approached us or become available to us that we've.
Didn't we have an ND speak to it last week before?
Yes.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. I, in the opening salvo, wanted folks to
Yes.
hear from both the medical society and the counselor from UVM who came and spoke to us and reached out early on.
That was at that time, yes.
He wanted to talk to us. So, yeah, so I've been trying to make sure that we hear the variety of perspectives on this.
Maybe more from them than, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to have them respond though to like, what are we actually kind of moving forward? So I think we've gotten to a place now where I'm getting a flavor from the committee that there's some disagreement, but it seems like we're not in a place where there's a consensus building around the potency caps generally. I think the work that I'd like us to do and to not belabor this and take a whole bunch of our time on it, because everyone's absolutely right. There are 5 other really complicated things that we've already started to make a lot of progress on. And I do want to focus our attention elsewhere for a bulk of our time. But I think that this question around, how do we best move forward with the medical program and giving the Cannabis Control Board some direction on that as part of this bill is important. Representative Higley.
Yeah, a question I probably should have asked the previous individual that testified, but why is it that the only way to cut this, to lower the THC content is with these chemicals? Is there another process at all that, has to do with, is it because it would change the way you use the substance so much that people wouldn't do it? Or is there another way to do it and still have a product that people would buy?
Chair Pepper, I know your time
I was
is
gonna
limited,
say,
but I
yeah.
feel like you might be able to give a little bit of an answer about like on regulated market, how folks are buying some of those concentrated products.
Yeah, and I am not the right person to ask, but I will just say that, and for the record, James Pepper, Chair of Cannabis Board. They're the most efficient and the most common ways to do this is to just take all the biomass out, take everything out but the THC, and then you're left with 100 or 95, 96% pure THC. And then you can use that to make it into an edible, or you can turn it into a vape cartridge, or you can dilute it down to 60%, put it into a solid concentrate. And there probably are methods to just kind of slowly, take out biomass and then leave some biomass in. So it's perfect 60-40 split between just kind of, cannabis biomass and THC, but that's certainly not the common way that these are done. And I don't know if people are doing that. I just don't think there's a market for a 60% concentrate. So.
Representative James.
One of the things I heard from our previous witness was that if you leave stuff in it, that's the lipids and the other stuff that he was talking about that's not not ideal for consumption kind of thing. It's leaving damaging material in it that is kind of what Rep. Cooper was talking about, that's worse than the THC itself.
But are those worse than what they're cutting the stuff with?
It,
I was gonna say, a lipid is a cut.
yeah,
THC is fat soluble, so the lipid is fat. So I believe that's used as an agent to help keep it emulsified, so it doesn't break and separate. It's how it sustains its state as one unified compound.
so like
If
you
we're
can
gonna go
either
down a science hole.
leave it in or add it back in.
Yeah, and I think, so Chair Pepper, you're saying that the industry practice typically is to take all, purified THC and then add things back in to bring it into compliance. And that's not what we heard from you.
That's what that C1D1 room is all about, is kind of just getting, using a solvent, just take out the THC, and then, in Vermont, put stuff back into it.
Representative Cooper.
But it comes out as an oil-based substance,
very-
and there are only certain things that are cut it and mix. Can't, like I said before, you get lipids out of milk, you can't put milk in it.
Yeah, and this is where the science is very cutting edge, because no one, first of all, you vaporize things at higher temperatures and you ignite them with, if you're gonna smoke a joint or something like that. So there's very little information about what happens when you're igniting these things at higher temperatures. And then there's no inhalation studies about what the effects of smoking a lipid are, you know, very little solid information about this. And that's why vitamin E acetate and MCT oil have been banned in certain states, but it's only after we've found that they cause like really serious health issues.
Thank you. I think I have one last thing to say about this is that I feel like we're constantly reacting to the black market. And by opening up a recreational use and an over 21 use market, we have opened a Pandora's box because we're doing this to the detriment of the medical program. And the folks who need to utilize the medical program have a legitimate need for these products. And I just really feel like, well, like I said, the over 21 market is a Pandora's box. And we're never going to solve this because the more we adjust the caps or whatever we need to do to get rid of the black market or to tamp down on it, the black market is just going to find another way, another product, another way of using the product. And it's just going to keep spiraling over and over and over again. So they're going to always be ahead of us. We're always going to be reacting to the black market.
Yeah, I know Chair Pepper needs to go. I'm gonna work with legislative counsel to see if I can capture some of what we heard today in a future draft. And I think, Pepper, if you and Bryn, can help work with us on some language that encapsulates some of the recommendations of the report. I think I'm hearing loud and clear from the committee that that a majority of the committee would prefer that we move beyond talking about the potency caps anymore as an outright for now. So that was a good outcome and some progress from today. So appreciate that. And I know this isn't everybody's favorite topic, but there are, I think, we've done remarkably well at achieving our goals. I think, Pepper, what you have shared with us in the numbers, the reports, what we've seen from revenue, what we've seen in the market is we have brought a whole bunch of people who used to sell on the illicit market into the legal market, kind of did that. And now we have a market that is very new and just needs a little bit of, we're working around the edges here. We're not making the big, huge policy decisions. And so some of these edge conversations about which things should be in the legal market versus out, those decisions are ours. We're the policy committee jurisdiction. And, I don't want to spend our entire session working on cannabis policy, and believe me, we're not doing that. So I really appreciate everybody though being willing to weigh in, even if you don't love that we're faced with some of these choices, people to help us make the best choices. Representative Haynes, did you want to?
I just wanted to say, and I hope that when it does come to a vote for this bill, that it's not like a last minute thing, like, oh, we've got all these changes, but we need to get rid of it by Thursday. Because that happens so often, like all of a sudden we have a brand new draft and no time to digest it. So I would appreciate,
We've got about a month
time
before crossover. My goal with this bill, if we're waiting for the administration to give us some feedback about H-140, the grants bill, and Pepper, I know you need to leave, so please feel free to go. Sorry. I should have said that a couple minutes ago. So, the things that we're working on, I am really trying to work with everybody on the committee that cares about different aspects of these things to make sure we're getting the feedback, that folks have time with the drafts. I will always make sure there's at least, 24 to 48 hours between the time that we have a draft and the time we do a possible markup and vote. So, and none of the things that we're working on right now are so urgent that I feel like we'll need to rush them out. I think last year there were some things that came before us that for a whole number of reasons we had to move faster than I would have liked. But even then, I made a commitment to all of you that we would warn things for markup and vote and make sure everybody had at least a day to read stuff. There aren't going to be any surprises here. I think today, I really wanted to open up and talk about all the big cannabis policy decisions and then narrow. So the next time we take up cannabis in a week or so, it's going to be about the narrow policy recommendations and specific language that tries to encapsulate the things that the Cannabis Control Board and some of the folks that we've heard really feel like are things we've got to do that are more on the decisions about the medical and are a little bit more housekeeping. But because these things, I think the feeling that you expressed, Representative Hango, about like, oh, the black market, it's just going to keep coming back. I think as long as we make the policy decision as the General Assembly to say these solid concentrates at the higher potency limits, we're not going to have those be legal, that those products that are being used by folks on the illicit market are going to be kind of haunting the market itself. And that is an okay policy choice for us to make. We've made that for a few years. That is a choice. I just wanted to make sure that because so many people that are on this committee today haven't been a part of that they heard the whole thing. I think now we've heard it. And now we're going to start getting a little more narrow into what do we really need to do on the medical market. So I appreciate everybody going along for the ride. Great. So I think unless anybody else has anything that they want to get on the record, there are a number of things that bills that are kind of out there. I know I contacted Tucker about the St. Johnsbury Charter.
Oh, yeah.
He's working on that one's still out. That's the last charter from
Last year.
that's still hanging out there. So Representative Higley and I met with Tucker and walked through what were all the things that we had raised questions and concerns about. He's going to put together a summary, which I hope we'll have in the next couple or few days here. So I pinged him on that, but he promised us a summary of those bullets.
What's left, basically what's left.
Yeah, and we want to go to them and say, hey, these are the things that are either covered by general law that you don't really need an explicit sort of contradictory thing to have the power, right? Because the whole charter is about giving municipality power to do stuff and regulate things. And then there were some things that we had thought were a little problematic or might need a change. And so that way, Mr. Whitehead, the town administrator, that he's able to go back to the committee and say, these are the recommendations, how do we feel about this? Do we need to go back and have a more public conversation, or can we just, tell the committee, yeah, go ahead and make these changes and move it along? So we're going to look for some local feedback and feedback from our colleagues from St. Johnsbury. So that one's still on the radar. With H-140, the grants bill that we took some testimony on, Representative Nugent and I met with the deputy secretary. They're going to come back to us with some recommendations. So hopefully we'll be able to take what's in the bill and what the administration's thoughts are and make some progress on that over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be looking next week at an amendment on the ethics bill. And so you all have given a lot of different questions have come up. I've gotten a sense of some of the pain points on that bill, but if there are things that we can help clarify, one of the things that I think we'll see some pretty significant changes on that we've talked about a lot on that ethics bill has to do with the what are we actually asking people to disclose with the stock holdings. And I think that's an area where we can hopefully just come to some consensus and get beyond that by next week. But yeah, so I think there's some of the other things we've had introduced. There are going to be vehicles coming that we could take a look at those. One of the biggest questions that I think I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet is whether, on H626, the animal welfare bill, like that's a huge lift. That would be a lot. I'm hoping that Representative Waters Evans and others can talk to the administration about like what's really possible with that before we bring it back into the committee. So we do have an awful lot on our plates. And there's a few weeks before crossover. I want to make sure that we do good work and get some of these things out because after crossover, there are gonna be two big things that I believe are gonna come to us from the Senate. One we talked about a lot in the context of the open meeting law stuff with S55. So we're gonna need to make that decision about the future of some of the COVID era hybrid meeting, remote meeting, and open meeting law provisions.
Mhm.
And then the other big one is that they're working on a lot of the sort of GovOps pieces on the flood response. What did we learn from the floods? So I didn't want anybody to get the impression that I had kind of, I know we have a couple of those bills on our wall. Sent one with a lot of funding stuff over to Ways and Means on the floor early in the session because they wanted to look at some of the funding. But I do want folks to be looking at a couple of the flood bills that we have, especially H 627, because elements of what's in that are going to be in the bill. I think we're going to have in the Senate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to have a busy session. I promise we won't be.
We'll be bored.
Yeah, well, we won't be bored, and we'll be doing lots of different things. If there are other specific things that are on the wall, we're going to be hearing some more kind of courtesy introductions.
Yeah.
And I want to try to give folks the opportunity to do those. So I have been kind of talking with folks.
Convention of States?
So I knew that might come up, and I have been kind of holding on to that as something that I knew that we wanted to talk about. That would also create a lot of conversation. So I think we can find time for that this year, Representative Higley. So let's you and I try and figure out when the right time is to have that, what I think will be a pretty spicy conversation.
Introduction, right?
Yeah.
No debate, just an introduction.
But I think you made it clear last year.
I'm glad you said that with that smirk.
I think you made it clear you wanted to bring in for a little bit of testimony on the bill, not just a courtesy introduction, right? Was your ask?
Well, that was kind of your ask, that you wanted a nonpartisan individual, and so I got you the name of a professor who's schooled in Article 5. If we want to curtail that piece of it, that's fine with me too, because I attended that Convention of States in Virginia and learned a lot more myself in that regard, so,
Okay.
it's up to.
I think given your interest in it, and given that I think it brings up a lot of conversations about the Constitution, it might be worthwhile for us to hear a little bit of background about the resolution that was passed a couple of years ago in Vermont, how that relates to it. I'd love for the committee to actually understand the issue a little bit better if we're going to take anything on it at all. And so if you're up for that, I'm up for it. And I think we all here can have the real conversation.
No, absolutely, and it was quite an educational opportunity for me to hear where it all began and
Yeah.
what there is out there, and
Yeah.
how it works. It's great.
So yeah, there's going to be a lot for us. So I just want you all as the committee to hear. Oh, the other thing is that I hear, this is one, especially given that Representative Murowicki has been doing a ton of work with some of the stakeholders on this. I want to hear the report that Makita did about the fossil fuel holdings on S42 and the private equity. Remember, we took some testimony on S42, the bill that's about divestment. I think that folks would rather we refer to it as decarbonization. They're in the investment world, but colloquially, it's still the divestment bill. Because it's not subject to crossover, I wasn't in a huge hurry. And I think that there's probably a path forward that we can at least learn about the Makita bill and all of that. But since we're not in a rush on that with the crossover deadline, I was thinking we could probably save that until March. But yeah, we've got a lot on our plate, but I think we can take one chunk at a time and we'll make some progress. So anything else anybody wants to get on the table before we break?
We just want to know what's problem.
It's on board.
So Water Severance and I have also been working on language for the government accountability.
How could I have forgotten that one? That's one of my favorite things. Yes, thank you for taking on working with Legislative Council. Do you have any sense of when we might be able to see a draft on 702, right?
I believe he said he's working on it this week.
Yeah.
Great, so maybe the end of next week or beginning of the following week? Okay, great. Thank you for doing the work offline on that. Really, really appreciate it.
a bill that was sponsored by most of the members of the committee that I wouldn't mind seeing the costing. 15%. Costing.
So like a fiscal note,
Yeah.
is that what you're referring to?
Not sure who it is.
I was told that we could not get fiscal notes unless the bill's actually being taken up by the committee and for discussion and
Oh, I'd agree with that.
markup, whatever.
I think we may be able though, because there's already been some work done on aspects, you're talking about 168, right? With that, yeah. Since there's been some work done on aspects of that, I think we can talk to our colleagues on Ways and Means about if there's past information that could just be re-upped where it wouldn't need to be a whole formal fiscal note to understand what the financial implications would be there. Yeah. So let's talk about that, Representative Cooper, and I'll see if Representative Kornheiser can tell me what the process is. We don't do a whole lot of fiscal analysis down here, so I'm unfamiliar with this process myself. Representative Rowe?
Yeah, a simple little bill I had introduced from a constituent who's a veteran who wanted us to look and see if we could designate the month of November as Veterans Month.
Oh, interesting. It's
Simple little bill.
Where did I see
Little
that?
ditty.
Okay,
So,
okay, yes. Where is that? Is that in our committee?
Is it here? I'm sorry, I haven't gotten 7,800 also.
yeah. It's your right.
I don't, gosh, I was trying to keep track of all of those types of bills, Representative Murphy, and that one escapes me. Or did escape me. Do you remember the number of it?
I don't.
Yeah, so let's talk about getting it up for an introduction. We'll certainly do it. Representative Rowe.
I'll look right now.
Anybody else before we break? We can adjourn and go off live